Good morning, everybody. Just want to extend a warm welcome to the practical tips to surviving financial concerns amidst the current health crisis. My name is Anna Knight. I'm a certified financial planner and the founder of a firm called Simplicity Financial. And again, I just want to welcome you and acknowledge you for taking the time to really look at your finances, the concerns that you might have right now. And I promise you by the end of this talk, you will have some actions that you can take to feel more empowered around your finances, even though we are in healthcare crisis at the moment. For those of you who don't know me, I am a seasoned financial professional. I've been in the industry for over 20 years now. Come from the banking world. I used to work for Royal Bank, National Bank, and Manulife. And I've started my private practice about 17 years ago, helping Canadians create action plans and put together game plans that help them achieve their financial objectives, whether that's retirement planning, estate planning, tax planning, planning for their kids' education, and just kind of a holistic approach, taking a look at every aspect of their finances, creating a game plan that makes sense, and then utilizing some of my business partners to facilitate those plans. Also, I've been a speaker at different organizations, used to speak for the Government of Canada as a consultant for their pensions. I taught some long-term retirement planning courses, and I also taught one day or a couple of hours seminars around specific money management topics. To facilitate our plans with Simplicity Financial, I work as a financial advisor with Keybase Financial, a mutual fund dealer based in here in GTA. They've been in business for over 25 years. On the insurance side, if we're facilitating life insurance, critical illness insurance, I work through Bridgeforce Financial. On the mortgage side, we work through assured mortgages for any lending needs for our clients. And then I also have strategic alliances with accountants, real estate agents, lawyers, and other professionals that can be brought in depending on what we're tackling on behalf of our clients. Over the years, I've donated some of my time to some charitable talks, whether that's women's shelters, shelters for youth, and just really empowering the youth and helping them make some better financial decisions. I've been featured in Globe and Mail, and I've also been a co-editor of a financial planning, retirement planning by design book. And I'm in the process of writing another book called The $1 Million Difference. It should be available to purchase over the next month or so. So just to give you a little bit of a perspective of where I'm coming from, I've been through different kinds of crises with my clients over the last number of years. So we've been here before. This is unfortunately a different subject, different concerns that we have, because on top of the financial crisis that we're all facing, and that's with our incomes and the economy and the market, we're also all have health concerns. Are we going to be okay? Are our loved ones going to be okay? How is this going to impact if we have parents in nursing homes and all of that? And it's also impacting our travel and our daily day-to-day operations. So I definitely don't want to undermine the emotional impact and the emotional toll this is taking on all of us. But I am hoping with some of the tips and ideas that I'm going to share with you this morning, it's going to at least give you some actions that you can take around your finances. So what I'm going to share with you this morning is 9 tips that I feel if you implement might feel some relief, some empowerment around your money. So the first one, and that's really the foundations of any time I sit down with my clients, and I think this is even more important right now, is really getting a grip of on your expenses. Taking a look at your last 2 months. So print out, let's say you're using your bank account and you've never done this before. Print out your entire month of, or look at your computer, look at all the transactions to go through your bank account, line by line by line by line, and account for every dollar that leaves your bank account. Also, if you use a couple of Visas or MasterCard, whatever that is, go through those statements line by line by line by line. Once you've done that, hopefully you can derive at 2 different categories that I want you to derive at. And that is your essential expenses. So how much money are you spending on things like housing, food, healthcare, utilities, personal expenses, transportation, or debts, versus how much money you're spending on the non-essential expenses, entertainment, dining out, non-essential shopping, vacations, savings for second home, college, or other objectives. So can you break down your expenses between your essential expenses and then non-essential expenses? Well, once you've done that, and especially if you're facing, which a lot of us are facing right now, job loss, income uncertainties, or any kind of crisis or any concerns around how much income is coming into your house, then I really want you to take a look at those two categories. And first and foremost, take a look at your essential expenses. What can you do to cut 10 to 20% of those expenses right off the bat? So let's take a look at some of those expenses. We're going to look at ideas around minimizing your debt costs. We're going to take a look at ideas around restructuring some things. But what else can you do? Can you call your insurance companies? Do they have any breaks on premiums? Can you lower your deductibles on your car insurance, which then is going to lower your monthly expenses on your car insurance? What can you do across the board to really drop your essential expenses by 10 to 20%? And then preserve that cash in your bank account. If you're looking at non-essential expenses, if you're facing job uncertainty and income loss, eliminate or cut the non-essential expenses to virtually nothing so that you can derive at a number. Let's say my essential expenses are $3,000 a month. How much do I have coming in, or how much can I count on, so that I have a better understanding what does my next 30, 60, and 90 day look like. Once you've derived at that, and there are some non-essential expenses that you were planning on, I'm hoping by now, especially if you're experiencing some job uncertainty and income uncertainty, you've put all those non-essential expenses on hold until things normalize. So things like updates in your home. I don't think any of us are traveling, but if you're planning or booking a travel right now, just eliminate and put off any non-essential expenses until we see some of these things normalize. Number 3, strongly suggest to avoid retail therapy. We are all guilty of doing a little bit of extra shopping here and there, and I think right now the retailers, the online retailers, are certainly tapping into our emotional state. Retail therapy usually makes us feel good, so they're tapping into that, and there's a lot of advertisements from Amazon, from Wayfair, from eBay, from other companies enticing us to buy the new summer dress, the next hot watch. All those things that really, when you look at your budget, do not fall under your essential category. So really, truly suggest for you to really eliminate and avoid retail therapy. Number 4, don't deplete your checking account. So if you're facing job loss and you have a little bit of money left in your bank account, before you spend it the next dollar, what I want you to do is take a look at your credit facilities available to you. And you will very rarely hear me talking about or urging you to increase your debt, especially increase your credit card debt. But we are in uncharted territory, in a space where we haven't been certainly not in my generation. So taking a look at what are your credit facilities, and then utilizing those facilities for the essential expenses only. I'm not encouraging you to go through retail therapy and buy that watch or those shoes or that dress, but looking at, can I utilize the credit facilities to buy my essential expenses, my groceries, maybe pay for some of my utility bills that have to be paid, and keep the cash that you have in your bank account in your bank account. So if you need to pay and use cash, go ahead and do that. Whether it's for little grocery shoppings or whatever that is, because you cannot buy everything with a credit card. So you do need to preserve and keep some money in your bank account. Some of you might, and I'm hoping more of you than none, have a little bit of an emergency fund. If you have that, this is certainly an emergency where we're facing job losses. That's what the emergency fund is for. Ideally, you want to have 3 to 6 months worth of your expenses in an emergency fund. If you do that, you should feel, okay, my family is going to be okay for a few months, even though there is a job loss and I'm not sure how long that's going to last for. Say your emergency fund should be either cash in your bank account or a secured line of credit. Those are probably the best places to tap into for emergency money. But of course, I do understand that not all of us are in that boat. If you have to tap into your savings past your bank account and past your line of credit or a secured line of credit, the question that I often get asked is, which pot of money should I tap into? So we're going to take a minute or two to really talk about that. Oftentimes what I find is when my clients do call a bank and they speak to, a customer service representatives and say, okay, I want to take out some money, and they have a tax-free savings account and an RSP account, they don't necessarily get the best advice. So really let's decipher this very quickly. If you have two pots of money, a tax-free savings and an RSP account, and you need $5,000, which pot should you pull from? If you take money out of a tax-free savings account, that money is yours already. You do not get taxed on it. So from a tax perspective, that is your most effective or best tax type of money to tap into. If you take $5,000 from an RSP at the end of the year, you're going to be taxed on it. The institution will also withhold some taxes right away. But if your income is still higher than what you paid for when you withdraw your $5,000, you might also get hit with some additional taxes at tax time. So you want to be mindful of that. And then it's also, and we're going to talk about that in a minute or two, what kind of vehicles is your tax-free savings and RSP account invested in? And is that an appropriate vehicle? And of course, when we have no choice or we don't have many other options, we have to do what we have to do. But I'm just trying to walk you through kind of the logic of how I would tackle this challenge here. If you have just a savings or an investment account versus an RSP account, I would also say go to the investment account for the same reasons as your tax-free savings account. Investment account, you pull money out, you might have to pay some capital gains or some dividend income or some interest income. You're not getting taxed on 100% what you've pulled out, versus in your RSP, what you pull out, you're going to get paid, you're going to get taxed 100% for every dollar you've taken out of your RSP. Moreover, depending on the structure of your tax-free savings account and or your RSP account, which pot of money should you tap into? When we're in a state of fear and concern, as we all are right now globally, what happens to the equity market or the stock market? It is highly volatile. And in fact, over the last couple of months, and I'm sure since we're all watching the news and the social media, we're fully aware that the markets have pulled back. In some cases, somewhere around the 10 to 15%, and depending on the week, it might have been as low as 30 to 35%. From the levels it was at in January of this year. So the equity portfolio, if you have RSPs or tax-free savings account, your equity portfolio or your stock portfolio or your mutual fund portfolio that holds stocks inside of it will be also impacted. So you might want to look at, if you have to take money out, do you have any fixed income you can take your money from? And fixed income would be things like bonds, whether it's provincial bonds, corporate bonds, or federal bonds. Or fixed income or cash would be my suggestion. So if you're going to tap into your RSP account because you've got no other choice, try to go into the part of the portfolio that has either cash or fixed income or bonds. It's just interchangeable name. The same with your tax-free savings account, the same with your non-registered investment account, and allow the equities, as long as you understand what those equities are, allow those equities to recoup over the next couple of months. And we're going to talk about market history and the equity recoup. Next, number 6 tip I would strongly suggest is really take a look at your debts. So remember when I urged you to take a look at your essential and non-essential expenses. Take a piece of paper and go through that. Once you've done that, what most of you will notice is there is a debt repayment that you're making on a monthly basis. Do you understand what the interest rates you're paying on different debts? So I'm going to ask you, if you have debt, to take another piece of paper and list all the different debts you have. So you're going to say your mortgage, the interest rate, and the institution, and your monthly payments. The credit card, the institution, the interest rates, and the monthly payments. The line of credit, the institution, the amount, the payment, and the interest rate. The same with your car loan. So you're going to list all the different loans on your piece of paper. You're going to ask yourself, is there any way I can request payment deferrals if you're facing a job loss? So contact those institutions. Can I take a look at some deferrals? And or alternatively, can I look at some ways to minimize the amount of money I'm spending on my debt by doing some realignments? So if you do have a mortgage and you want to look at a deferral, the one thing you do want to understand, and I know there was a little level of uncertainty or unsureness at the very beginning, but most banks these days are offering a 6-month deferral. That deferral is going to be charged to your mortgage, meaning the interest that you've deferred that you would have normally paid gets tagged on to the principal of your mortgage. And in a simple example, if you deferred a $2,000 mortgage payment for 1 month and you had 20 years remaining on that mortgage and your interest rate was 4%, that $2,000 deferral is going to cost you additional $266.97 of the life of the mortgage. So if you do that 6 times for 6 months, just multiply that by 6. Now, the other strategies is when things go back to normal, what are some of the strategies that you can implement to minimize that impact? So perhaps making additional principal payments to litigate that extra payments or the extra cost that you would otherwise make. And that's a very simple calculation. So if you're facing a job loss and you're in that situation, interest rates are quite low, I would suggest to defer the mortgage payments for a couple of months so that allow yourself, again, we're trying to preserve our cash because we're not sure how long the crisis is going to last. So this would allow you to do that. If you have credit cards, contact the lenders, contact the credit card companies. Some of them have long waiting times to call them, but a lot of the information is available online. What you'll notice, some of them, they've lowered the interest rates. Some of them, they allowed for interest rate deferrals. Just double check if the interest then gets tagged on, and most likely it will. So then you're paying an interest rate of 19% or 17% or 12%, and then that's getting tagged on, and you just want to be aware of that. If you can defer payment on loans, again, for the same purpose we just talked about, we're talking about preservation of capital. If you have ways to amalgamate, consolidate some of your higher interest earning debts, so credit cards, 2 ways you can do it. You can request a consolidation loan with one of the banks. What I am suspecting is there should be some loan structures available out there at a reasonable interest rate to allow for that to happen. And I'm hoping the government is going to bring out more loan structures like that in place. But alternatively, if you do own a home and you do have some equity in your home, so the way you want to look at the equity of your home is the easiest way to tap into it is go up to 80% of the value of your home. So if you take a look at roughly what the houses are selling in your neighborhood, and you take a look at the mortgage balance that you have, do you have any wiggle room to go up to the 80% of the value of your home? And if you do, there's 2 things you can do with that. Obviously, you can consolidate higher interest earning debt, credit card loans, car loans, all of that into your mortgage, and then have everything at a much lower interest rate. So then that's going to free up more cash on a month-to-month basis for you. And of course, it's going to save you a lot of interest in the long run because you're most likely consolidating debt at 6 to 20% into debt that right now you can get a home equity line of credit or a mortgage, let's call it in at around 3%. So you might want to look at that. Another example here is just an actual numerical example. So let's assume you had $50,000 worth of debt. You had a car loan at 8%, and you had some credit cards at, I believe I've put in here about 20%. So the average rate or interest rate between the 2 debts, so your line of credit or car loan and your credit card, was about 16%. If you've taken that $50,000 and you've applied it into your mortgage and you were able to lower the interest rate, again, I kind of exaggerated that a little bit. I put in a 4% interest rate on your mortgage. The interest or monthly interest cost savings would be about $500. So you would be saving yourself $500 a month right from the get-go on your monthly budget. And then on top of that, once things go back to normal, you can restructure a much more aggressive way to repay that portion so that you can be in a much better overall financial situation. Number 7, and I know most of you have already done this, but I figure this is a good time to recap some of this. Investigate the government support that you're eligible for. First and foremost, there's unemployment insurance and sickness benefits, which will cover 55% of your earnings. And then there's also been the Canada Emergency Response Benefit that's been rolled out. There's been some controversy around it, but right now, most individuals, even self-employed individuals, contract employees, as long as you've earned over $5,000 when you filed your taxes last year, you're eligible for up to $2,000 per month for the next 4 months. You do have to apply. You can apply online. You can apply through the phone system. I heard that if you apply through the phone systems, the likelihood of getting your payment is higher. Again, there's a huge amount of people applying for this benefit, so there's been some glitches. There's been some individuals that are not being able to get their payments on time, and it's causing further financial stress. So just kind of be aware of that. The next thing the government has rolled out here in Ontario is additional support for children or families. So a one-time payment of $200 per child up to the age of 12 and $250 per child with special needs. The next thing is Canada Child Benefit is they're providing a one-time payment of $300 per child in May, so you can be on the lookout for that. That is automatic. And there's also a GST credit in the early May of around $400 for a single person and $600 for couple. Next thing the government has already rolled out is student loans. We're talking about student loan for deferral. There's also a deferral of taxes owing. So the tax filing deadline is now June 1st, and there's going to be an extension from when you're going to have to start paying interest if you do owe any money to the CRA. Most municipalities have also announced deferrals or ability to defer property taxes and utility payments without any penalty for anywhere between 1 to 6 months. As we talked about, mortgage and credit card companies, most of them have announced some kind of a relief where you can defer payments. Some credit card companies announced interest rate reductions for their customers. So just really check in with your financial institution to see how is all this impacting you from a mortgage and lending perspective. For renters, I know that the government in Ontario has announced a $500 payout would be paid directly to your landlord, and you do have to apply for that. So you just have to go to canada.ca, and there you'll see all the COVID-19 benefits, and you can scroll through and see what you're eligible for. Utility companies have also announced flexible repayment schedules, so it's just a matter of contacting them. The same with the telecommunication companies or your cell phone providers or your Netflix providers, whatever that might be. So when you're looking at your essential expenses, going back to my tip number 1, and then you're looking at all the different initiatives that the utility companies are taking, municipalities are taking, and the government is taking, what can you utilize to defer the maximum amount of essential payments you have to make today to preserve your cash flow and make those payments when you do go back to work, when we're back to a normalized life. Next thing I want to just take a moment or two to talk about is the government's incentives or government initiatives as part of the COVID-19 for business owners. There's been a bit of a pushback on the announcements, but let me just quickly go through it. If you work for yourself and you're not incorporated, the only thing you're really going to be eligible for is the CERB, which is the $2,000 per month if you have suffered significant income loss or flat out job loss, or if you're a contractor. If you're a corporation, And if you're 100% salaried, you could be eligible for the CRB, and also you could be eligible for the wage subsidy and the $40,000 interest-free business loan. Again, visit with your institution to find out how to apply for that. If you earn $100,000 or more, but it is all dividend income that you're paying yourself out of your own corporation, the only thing you would be eligible for is the CERB benefit that you have to apply for. So those are the structure as it stands right now. I think as of this morning, I saw an update because there's been quite a bit of a pushback from small businesses around this interest-free business loans and the wage subsidy. So so far, the update from the government has been that their interest-free loan is now eligible for corporations that have declared at least $20,000 of payroll income. Used to be $50,000. So, you know, it's going to open things up for more businesses. I don't believe the financial institutions have updated their systems as of yet, because this was just announced. So kind of be on the lookout for that. So you definitely take advantage, take a look at what are you eligible for. And the next thing I want to talk about is when we're looking at our expenses, when we're looking at our essential expenses, when we're looking at our non-essential expenses, and we're looking at places to pull money from to meet our obligations. Of course, if you have no options, you have no options. However, if you're going to look at your long-term investments or your long-term assets that you've set aside, and you were thinking of potentially cashing it out right now, just out of concern because you think the markets will never rebound. Let's really take a look at what's the history of the equity market or the stock market. So here's I'm going to walk you through a couple of slides around that. The first one really talks about recessions and expansions. This is the US economy, and this chart is up until the end of 2017. What I want you to notice on this chart, so it goes from 1902 until 2017, so quite a long period of time. And it really points to two things. Expansions or growth phases in the economies have by far been longer and more often than the recessionary periods across the board, okay? As an example, from 1854 to 2009, 33 cycles, we had 16 recessions and 42 expansion periods. From 1945 to 2009, we had 11 cycles, 11 recessions, and 59 expansions. So I just want to point that out to you. The next slide really talks about what we're facing today. What we're facing today is massive uncertainty, and where it reflects is the fluctuations of the market. This is a US market, and you can see in January 2020 that daily percentage change in the market was quite small. So the market always does fluctuate. But if you compare it to March 2020 and all the news that's flying at us and all the levels of uncertainty, and is the lockdowns going to go on for 2 more weeks? Do we have a medical shortage? What are the death rates? How is the economy going to be impacted? Are we already in a recession? Are we going into a recession? How deep is the recession? All that stuff that we're facing today, that is what's created the current market fluctuations. And you can see the wide ranges of fluctuations from this is capturing March. That's what we're facing right now. So if you're going to sell your investments or sell your long-term investments, you are selling into that fear. You're selling into a period of time where your valuations are quite low. Going back to the history lesson here, again, this is a S&P TSX, so the Canadian market. Again, looking back 1956 to end of 2019, and it again points out to two things. Average length of a bull market, so positive market, is 54 months. The average length of a bear market or negative market is 9 months. So, and that's going back quite far, ways back in the history. The average decline in negative market is 28%. I would say on average right now, we're somewhere in the range of 20% decline. So we're kind of within the norm. The average gain in the bull market, in a positive market, is 129%. So the decisions are yours. You can always cash out, you can always exit. But if you're looking at statistics like that and you're looking at the histories of the market, I know it always feels whenever we're in the market decline that it's never going to end. Trust me, this is not my first time around, and it always does feel like this. But we are resilient as a human race. We always rebound. Markets always go back up. And through all the crises we've been through, we've always seen a positive market rebound. And this really speaks to that. So this is a chart that talks about declines in the market of more than 30% and what happens following that. So let's really take a look at the period from, as an example, 1956 to 1957. We had a 30% decline in the market. After a year of that, the markets were back up to 26 or 29%, and 10 years later, the market averaged about 108%. From our financial crisis, most of us can recall that we had a 49% or 50% decline in the market for about a period of 9 months. 1 year following that, we had a 57% rebound in the market. And it's not capturing the 10 years, but you can see, we've had a 50% decline. Year later, if you were patient, you've made your money back and you were able to grow from that point forward. Here's all the crises we've been through since 1950. We've been through the Korean War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK assassination, Desert Storm, Asian financial crisis, 9/11, North Korean missile test, subprime mortgage crisis. All those declines, that they have resulted in market corrections. However, 1 year later, we can see that the average appreciation has been about 33%, and an average appreciation of the market following those declines on a 2-year basis has been about 45%. So let's take a look at the decisions we can make as an investor. So going back to 1974, let's say we invested $10,000 in the S&P 500, January 31st, 1973. So just before the bear market of 1974. So we invest in January 31st, January, sort of that market really corrected itself around that September 1974. So our $10,000 would be worth about $5,800. So what do we do then? We can stay invested. So we're staying invested, which is the middle blue line. And at the end of 5 years, our $10,000 will be worth about $12,596. At the end of 10 years, would be worth about $24,000. If we remove the money at the low point and move the money into a GIC at that point at those current rates, that $10,000 would be worth about $9,500 at the end of 10 years. So we still have not made back our $10,000. At the end of 10 years, it would be worth around $16,000. Lastly, if we had the ability to invest around that low period of the market and add $10,000, that same $10,000 invested in the S&P 500 would be worth about $34,000 at the end of 5 years and about $67,000 at the end of 10 years. So all I'm saying here is September or the low markets of 1974 would have been a great time to add money. Similar thing happened in 2009. So let's say we invested January 31st, 2007. And trust me, it was a very interesting period of time in my life. I had a young son. I was, running my practice, had my clients invested, and we were all going through this together along with all my clients. My son was born in December, and I kind of came back to work over the summertime because, of course, we've experienced drastic market corrections, and we needed to sit down and really take a look at what's going on and how do we come out of that. So if my clients taken their $10,000, moved the money into a GIC at the end of 3 years, that $10,000 would have still only be worth about $6,000 because they've capitalized on the loss. Again, the market went from $10,000 to $5,800 at the low of the financial crisis. And even 3 years later, that would only be worth about $6,000. Alternatively, if my clients stayed invested, they have 3 years, they would have made $953. So their $10,000 in January 2007 would have been worth about $10,900 and about $17,000 at the end of 6 years following the market low. If they added $10,000 to the S&P 500 at the low of the market, it's in and around that 2009, they would have been able to make about $29,000 under $10,000 at the end of 3 years, or about $46,000 at the end of 6 years on the same $10,000 worth of capital. So again, ask yourself, will history repeat itself? And I'm only bringing 2 examples, but I can essentially walk you through every single market correction, and the pattern is pretty much the same. This is a quick example of investing $10,000 in 1915. So, through all the different crises we've had, this is now taking a look at the S&P 500 index in US currency. We're looking at all the different crises that we went through. So Korean War, Cuban Missile Crisis, oil crisis, Asian financial crisis, the dot-com, September 11th, that's all bundled together, North Korean subprime mortgage crisis. So we're going from 1950 to 2019. And if we invested $10,000 in the S&P 500 and we left it alone, and it annualized an 11.2% rate of return, despite the market corrections, that $10,000 today or at the end of 2019 would be worth about $18.9 million if we reinvest the dividends, despite of all these market corrections. And when you ask yourself, let's say you're in your 30s and your 40s, am I going to be around for that period of time? I often urge my 50-year-old clients to also plan for much longer periods of time, because we are living longer. We are living into our 80s and 90s. So these are crucial times and crucial decisions to be made. So investing, going back to that US market example, if we invested $10,000 at that average 11% rate of return, where would we be at in 25 years? That $10,000 would be worth about $142,000. At the end of 50 years, so not as long as that graph is showing, but just looking at a 50-year period, we would be at over $2 million off the same $10,000 with the 11.8% average rate of return. So where we are today with the current crisis is we are at a space where businesses are worth on the stock market 20 to 30% lower than the long-term valuation. And the long-term valuation is essentially what could that business be sold for or acquired for. So let me give you an example. If Rogers wanted to acquire TELUS, one example, today on the stock market, if they're both publicly traded companies, TELUS would be worth 30% less than it was worth in the beginning of the year. TELUS's revenues, yes, could they be impacted right now because some people are not making their payments because of job losses? Absolutely. But the business as a whole most likely has not declined by 30%. However, if the business is to be sold today, the stock market says that it's worth 30% less, or it could be acquired by Rogers for 30% less. And that decline is strictly to do with the emotional response that the market is having to the current crisis. So if anything, I would urge you to take advantage of the current low valuations and add to your investment portfolios if you can. So the lessons I wanted to leave you with around the market history is we've been through crises before. This is not the first crisis that the markets and the economies and the world has gone through. Markets have always rebounded and strongly. The bull markets or the positive markets far outweigh the bear or the negative markets. and that's history going all the way back to the early 1900s. Staying invested for the long run is truly the key in making sure that your investments or your financial well-being is looked after. My number 9 tip is really asking for help. So we've went through 8 tips that you can implement right away for yourself to really take control over your finances and see what you can do to alleviate your stress around money and to take charge, because we all feel much more positive mentally if we can take charge and if we understand what's going on. And if finances are not your strong point, do go out and seek some advice. So please, I would strongly suggest to go out there and get some assistance so you can create some actions for yourself. So to recap, again, my 9 tips: do get a handle on your expenses. Do hold off on any non-essential expenses right now. Do avoid retail therapy. Don't deplete your checking account, even if you're living paycheck to paycheck. Do tap into your savings if needed. Manage your debt smartly. Investigate and apply for any eligible government benefits or relief. Don't sell your long-term investments unless you absolutely have to, and do ask for help. So where do you go from here? Again, most of us are familiar that if we take webinars, courses, seminars, and we don't do anything about it, it's not really powerful. It's not really changing our lives. So what can you do right now? Review the tips that we've discussed. What can you control? What actions can you commit to yourself you're going to take, and by when? And if you need to engage someone to help you, who can you get to help you? Just a reminder, at Simplicity, our vision and mission has always been to educate and empower Canadians to take control over their finances by helping them to create actionable plans towards their goals. And I always start and finish with one sentence: how can we be of service? And especially today. So we are available for complimentary consultations to help you create action-driven advice. If you wish to take advantage of that, please reach out to my colleagues at info@simplicityfinancial.ca. We are committed to getting back to you within the same business day. We are certainly able to schedule a call or Zoom call or a phone call to help you with whatever you're dealing with, however small or big this might be. This is our way to contribute to the community. This is our way to give back, and it is our way to help our community get through the crisis that we're going through. The one thought I want to leave you with, and I've been accused of, sometimes to be quite positive, but if I look at nature and I look at what we go through, the sun always shines after the storm. It truly does. We're already seeing glimpses of hope in Italy, in Germany. We're seeing those countries, because they got hit with this virus, leveling off in terms of the cases. So we're seeing a little bit of hope there. There was a little bit of glimpse of hope coming out of the US, a little bit of hope coming from Canada. So we are going to get through this together. I have no doubt. I think that one big lesson is, how can we be of contribution to each other, to support each other mentally, financially, if we are able to, and emotionally, to get through what we have to get through over the next couple of weeks. Since this is a live call, if you wish to ask any questions, you can go through the live chat button at the very bottom and just type in your questions, and I'll try to take as many questions as possible. If you need to get in touch with me directly, you can do so at annak@simplicityfinancial.ca. At this point, I just want to thank you again for your time. I hope I've inspired you to take some action and control, and I want to wish you all health and mental strength to get through what we're going through right now. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the day.